He's a rock and roll disc jockey.
The new 98.9 WMMO Orlando's classic hits, Joe Rock.
A broadcaster with energy and that voice.
Not Tom Petty, though. He did his greatest hits, put this one on it, it became a hit all on its own.
He loves music and the musicians that produce it.
Springsteen. I've seen him live over 250 times.
A DJ turned singer-songwriter.
Picking up a head of steam.
Invite him on stage and he'll show up.
Are you ready for Joe Rock?
Move over, Bret Michaels. Here comes The Rock. One-on-one with radio guy Joe Rock. Alrighty, Mr. DJ in the house. Joe, nice to see ya.
Same here.
Anytime I get a chance to talk about music and rock and roll and pop music, I'm always excited. You know a lot about music.
Yeah, amen. That's how you got the name, Joe Rock.
Joe Rock. You know, that is a good name. That is a good name. You can't go wrong with that.
Yeah, right.
You know, it's funny. The first time I saw you, maybe we'll be able to roll the video here and take a look. So I'm at the Hard Rock here in Orlando. Bret Michaels is cranking out, and then all of a sudden, Bret is like, "Where's Joe? Where's Joe? What was going on, man? What was happening?"
Well, you know, one of the cool things about my job, and I love this, is I get to talk to all these different rockers all the time. And being a musician myself, a lot of times to break down the walls, because they do a million interviews and they get asked the same things over and over, is I talk to musician to musician. And so now Bret, I've spoken to a number of times over the years. We've run into each other at so many shows. He's been at the WMMO Downtown Concert Series a number of times. We've gotten to be fairly close. So when we were talking that time before the show, I was like, hey, think I can come up and do a number? He's like, absolutely. He's like, we're definitely going to make this happen. Don't let it not happen. I'm like, okay. So
where were you standing at the Velvet Sessions there? Were you off stage? And
I was right off to the side of the stage. And the whole thing was, originally it was supposed to be like, oh, come out in the middle of the song. I'm like, okay, fine. Next thing I know, they're just starting the song. And all of a sudden, Bret's like, where's Joe? Get your ass out of
here. Yeah, he kind of thrust you up there.
Yeah.
You were kind of looking around going, okay, should I break in now? Or
Well, the whole thing was, figuring I was going to come in halfway through the song, I'm like, okay, I know the parts of the song there, this and there. And he calls me out right at the beginning. And I'm like, and he's like, yeah, go up to the front of the stage. I'm not sure if he's telling me now, yeah, you start the song, you start singing it. I'm like, no, it's your song. You start singing it. I'll sing the parts that go together. And also, too, it's like, it's funny because if we get to see the video, I look a little lost because most of the time when I'm on stage, I have a guitar. And now I'm out there on stage and I'm like, I don't have a guitar. It's not my show. It's his show. What do I do?
Well, plus you guys didn't have any rehearsals either.
Right, absolutely, not even close.
He's done it a million times, but you are like, right. Hey, this is my moment.
Right, and it was also too like we were, you know, I was trying to get a moment to have a chance just to speak to him before we went on, because originally what happened with that show is he was supposed to do it 3 weeks earlier, and then the night before the show, his dad had a heart attack, and then he lived for a little bit longer,
then
but
he
didn't
passed
make it
away.
to the weekend.
Yeah.
So I'm going to get a chance to talk to him a bit. Like I told our listeners, look, Bret's coming in a few weeks. If you want to send him a card that you know is going to be handed right to him, send it to me here at the station. So I also had I'm there on the side of the stage, and I got a bag full of cards that the listeners sent the station for me to hand to Bret. And I'm like, so that also kind of like all these different things going on at once. It's like, wow, it's just...
You know, that guy has really impressed me. I think I've seen him now maybe 3 or 4 times. I think I've seen the band Poison one time.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what I love about that guy. He brings out the energy like he's frickin' Freddie Mercury and doesn't stop. And I love that kind of performer. And then the other thing I just, and you don't see this a lot in rock and roll, afterwards he goes, I'll be signing autographs, just come on by. And I've seen him sit at the Hard Rock over in Tampa for 2-3 hours, you know, after a hard show and signing every autograph, every picture. I don't know many rock stars that do that.
You know, I've said this to him. The cool thing about him is he's genuine. He hasn't lost that feel of the guy who he was before he got any fame. So like one of the things he does during his show is he always brings out military members retired or active, out onto the stage, and he'll tell you, this is not a political statement. This is a thank you to our military for everything they do for us. Every single show, he does that. And when I spoke to him about it, he goes, my whole family is military and first responders. He's like, that's what they do. It's like, he grew up in a working class family. He approaches his music like a working class guy, and he's never lost that. And I love that about him.
Yeah, he lives, in Scottsdale, up in Arizona or something?
I actually am not sure, because every time I see him, it's somewhere else on the road.
Yeah, he is a hardworking.
Yes, he never stops.
Yeah, no, he really is cranking it out. But I just love his, and it's one of those guys you wouldn't, because he got, when I look back in the '80s of those guys, it was kind of like another hair band. They had a bunch of great songs, but you just kind of wrote them off as just another hair band. You just did, back in the '80s and '90s, and when I've seen them now, I think these guys have it's like but major staying power that they're going to be around a long time cranking this stuff out.
Yeah, absolutely.
People want to see them, and the girls love Bret. They can't get enough. What happened with that Rock of Love? Does he ever talk about that, or?
He did talk about it recently, because the 20th anniversary of it being on TV just passed. Can you believe that? 20 years.
That was 20 years ago? Oh, my God. I feel like I was watching that just the other day.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And he did talk about it. I think he has a good sense of humor about it.
Yeah.
Look, if somebody came to you or I and was like, hey, we're going to put you on TV, we're going to do this thing, and you're going to make a lot of money.
Yeah. And you get to make out with, 25 girls per show.
Yeah.
What
I don't think my wife would like that part of it, but
yeah, right. Well, you just get her to you send her shopping, and I know that was it was actually kind of a fun show, to be honest with you. Him trying to pick out his girl, and the girls fighting. It was good TV.
Yeah, there you go, and that was the bottom line.
So let's talk about DJ. Do you like the word DJ, or do you like announcer, or what broadcaster?
I use all of them. Still to me, I'm a DJ. It's one of these things that I have this discussion with a lot of people, because it's like, do we still call them albums? I'm like, I do.
Me
like,
too.
Somebody's coming out with a new album. Yeah, they're coming out with a new record. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the way I look at it. So DJ is disc jockey, because you're taking the disc, putting them on for a
right.
Yeah, everything's computerized these days, so I'm not necessarily.
You're not lifting up. You're not lifting up the records.
I'm not. It's not records,
them?
Not CDs.
Right.
It's all computerized these days. How we operate everything, and but to me, those words those phrases, DJ, will never go away. Yes, I'm a broadcaster. I'm an on-air personality.
Right.
Yeah.
No. It's interesting because DJ, you're right. Sounds like you're still spinning records, and I don't know. It's just got a connotation. I think some people like out there that do it for a living, and others. I think there's going to be a lot of people. Is it a tough business to get into? Is it easy? And then what would you recommend for somebody that goes, I want to work on air and radio, or get out now?
The people who say run, get out now, look, you know what happens, and, television, I'm sure you've run into this before. There's an illness that's involved.
There is, isn't there? Yeah.
And you recognize that radio illness in somebody else when you meet them. And it doesn't matter if you could tell them, look, there's tough times in everything you do, so you just have to choose what it is you're going to do. As soon as I got into radio, I was like, I'm home. This is where I belong. And I love my job. And so, as the saying goes, if you love your job, you'll never work a day in your life. So I don't work anymore. I mean, in many ways, and believe me, it's not, some people would be like, wow, that's terrible. But in many ways, I haven't changed since high school.
Right.
Because when I was in high school, all I wanted to do was buy records and concert tickets, and that was it. Now, I don't have to worry about buying new music or buying tickets to show, because a lot of times, like, here, we need you to go to this show.
Oh, okay.
Okay, like, it's like, all right, I guess I have to go. I remember, everybody's talking now because the Eagles are going out on the road and doing the Hotel California album in its entirety. And I guess it was just spring of last year that the Eagles came through town. They played Camping World Stadium with Jimmy Buffett.
Right.
And it's like, listen, we're going to go do a tailgate at the show with the station so that all the listeners can come and be at our tailgate, and then you go to the show, okay? And I'm like, you're sending me to a show that, if I remember right, sold out. The Eagles and Jimmy Buffett, and we're having the tailgate, like, we're throwing the tailgate.
Right.
And you're like telling me I'm going for work. Yeah, I'm okay with that.
This is Oh, I'll suffer through this somehow.
Yeah. But to your question is advice I would give to somebody getting into it.
Yeah.
Go to school. That's it.
So high school and then college.
College,
too?
absolutely.
No,
Because,
would you not get hired if you didn't have a college education to get even an entry level DJ position?
It's tough to say. Well, you're not going to get hired right away as an air personality.
Right.
That's the whole thing. You're going to have to do something else first and then get attention. So you want to have a lot of background. Most of the time, if you start as an intern and you impress people, you go to college, you get an internship at a radio station, impress people. They'll hire you for something else. Then you just have to know and you have to work. And that's the way it goes. Show them, hey, I know how to do all these things. Can I try now talking on the air? And they might give you a smaller opportunity to do something. You're not going to jump on. You're not going to be like, okay, you're the new morning guy.
Right.
Like that doesn't happen.
Right. Right.
For me, I was lucky when I started because I'm like one of the last of a dying breed because I'm living and breathing music since I'm a teen. And people have been telling me since my voice changed, you should be doing radio.
Right. Well, you do have the voice.
Right.
Yeah, no question.
I went on vacation years later now. I'm in my early 30s. I go on vacation and I meet a guy who works at the local station where I live. And we become friends.
Right.
And then all of a sudden he needs somebody to produce his show. And I said, I don't know anything about radio, but I can produce your show. I'm telling you, I can. And then they were like, well, if you produce it, could you also do this, that, and the other? I'm like, yes, I can. And then no time at all, matter of months, I was on the air. And in less than a year, I was full-time in radio.
I was listening to Adam Carolla, and he was saying the best thing to do, man, is just, if you want to get into radio, just start hanging around a radio station. Just show up. Just,
Well,
and I know
these days it doesn't really work because it's like, radio stations most of the time are owned by corporations.
Large corporations.
And you think about it, if you just show up in a corporate atmosphere, they're probably going to be like, call the cops.
Call the cops, arrest them. We got to get them out of here.
Yeah. So you don't necessarily want to do that. But if you start out by going to school and then you get an internship, you're invited into the station. You're supposed to be there.
Right.
And you're there to learn. So people will show you how to do all the things that you need to learn how to do.
Right. So what do you have to do to be good? What is, when you listen to someone, what is it you pick out that you go, that guy's good or that girl is good?
Because they're having a conversation with you. When I turn on the microphone, I'm talking to you.
Right.
And only you.
And not everyone can do that.
You have to be comfortable with what you're talking about. I mean, I'm lucky. People sometimes ask me, like, do you actually like the music you play? I love the music I play. And, all this music is part of my life. So to tell these stories, like you pick out almost any of the artists we play, and I can tell you a story about them, whether it's something that I personally experienced or I just know it, because, I would go out and buy records at 15 years old, come home, rip it open, and read every single thing that was written on the sleeve, on the inside. So I knew who produced it. I knew who the musicians were. And then, you hear these stories over the year. One of the best stories I ever heard, Rolling Stones playing somewhere. Charlie Watts is very famously the most conservative member of the group. And he's up in his hotel room asleep, and Mick Jagger's down in the bar, and he meets these girls, and he's talking to them, and they want to meet Charlie. So he gets on the phone, he calls up Charlie's room, he's like, Charlie, get down here, I'm in the bar, and these girls want to meet my drummer. And he hangs up the phone. Charlie gets up, gets dressed, comes down, walks into the bar, and punches Mick.
I'm not your drummer.
Don't ever call me your drummer ever again, and goes back up and goes to sleep. Now, I hear that story, and then I hear it confirmed by the musicians involved. How can you not want to tell that story?
Yeah, well, it's a classic story, and I think it's true, and I think lead singers tend to do this sometimes. That's my band. I've even heard like Steven Tyler correct himself at times where he goes, I can't say it that way. These are my guys.
Yeah.
I front these guys, and but when you look at a band like the Stones these days, like I just saw them. I am probably seen them 15, 20 times in my lifetime.
Wow, nice.
Yeah, since the 80s. To me, the greatest, I mean, I know it's sort of a cliche, the greatest rock and roll band out there. What do you think of a band like that?
I love the fact they have so many elements to what they do. That's the whole thing. Like, you look at the Stones, everyone's like, right away, rock. And I'm like, okay. But the Stones have done reggae. And they've definitely done some funk stuff. They've done some country. And, they've got the soul. They've got all these different, and the blues, big time in the blues. The last studio album they released was all blues.
Yeah, I think they won a Grammy for it.
Yeah,
I think.
and they love all that stuff, and they do it. And I'm like, wow. Because when artists have those influences, and they talk about who their influences were, it was an education to me because I cared. So it's like all of a sudden I look at a record, and they covered, Peter Tosh. Who's Peter Tosh? So I went and sought out Peter's version of a song, and then I hear that, and I'm like, wow. And then to realize, like everything, they covered the Temptations, so they worked with Graham Parsons and all these different names from all these different genres of music, and I just had to know more and keep learning. So it was an education to me, a band like that.
But what's interesting, and I did want to talk with you about this, and the Stones are a good example of this. You work for, what would be classic rock? Would that be the right?
Classic hits.
Classic hits. Okay. So you're the Rolling Stones. You got a new song out. Okay. Boom. Crank it out. Here's the problem. You guys aren't going to play that new song. It's not going to happen. And it's not going to happen in Phoenix. It's not going to happen in Los Angeles. It's not going to happen in New York. Classic stations are not going to play. If you're the Stones, you're McCartney, you're Billy Joel, I could go down the list.
Right. Now, Billy Joel is one of the guys who's like, I have no interest in writing new music.
Right. He's talking about, I don't want to write any more songs. I think he'll change, though.
But you know what? Here's the whole thing, and this is what people don't realize, is that because I talk to people about this all the time, and they're like, you know what? You guys just play the stuff. You don't play the new stuff. I'm like, okay, here's the deal. If I actually did an experiment with you, and I put on a new song in the middle of everything, and you had the ability to turn it off, tops, how long do you think you're going to leave it on?
Well, but see,
answer the question and we'll go. How long do you think and you can answer for you, and you don't have to be the average.
Right.
How long do you think you're going to leave it on?
I feel like if it was the Stones and you said, here's the latest hit by the Rolling Stones, I would listen to it. And especially if you were playing it. Now, if it was some band I maybe wasn't that excited about, yeah, you're right, I might change it. But here's what I'm saying. I think when you and I were younger, we were all on the same page in the sense of, new song by Aerosmith. New song by, we'll use, Poison or Skid Row, whatever. We kind of got played and introduced to new music.
Yeah.
Now, we're not going to hear it. And I don't know. Here's what I'm wondering. When you're an artist, even an established artist, this is my point. What do you do to introduce your music? I mean, you can't really introduce it to a younger audience.
Well, the whole thing is the purchasing of music. The music industry changed before the radio industry changed. And that's what it was all about. So just to go back to the one point I was going to make, the average listener tops will give new music that they're unfamiliar with 30 seconds.
Okay.
Before they turn it off.
And obviously programmers and stations are frightened of that.
Well, it's not so much that. It's like, look, we want to play what you want to hear.
Right.
It's really that simple. So this is another discussion I have. People are like, well, there's a million songs that the band plays. Why don't you play this song? Because nobody plays this one.
Deep cut.
And the reason is this. There's a reason why nobody plays it. Because you bought an album and you took it home and you liked all the songs on it. Song B you loved.
Right.
You loved.
But the rest of the group,
but nobody else did.
Liked it. Yeah.
So when you sit and talk with all your friends, you have all those non-hit songs that, I love this one. I really love this one. But not everybody else does. But if you all discuss song A, which was the hit, everybody can agree on that. So we want to give you what you want. You're going to like it. It's like that's the whole thing. We're really trying to,
But here's my point too: is in other words, you're not introducing a younger audience to newer songs. You know what I mean?
We may not be. You have to kind of change your statement a little bit, because it's not that we're not introducing a new audience to newer songs. We are introducing a newer audience to classic music.
To classic.
So there's a great quote that came from Chuck D from Public Enemy. It's new music if I've never heard it before.
Okay, I can follow that.
Yeah, because I go back and listen. we were talking before we got on the air. We were talking about the Keith Richards Netflix special.
Right.
And somewhere in there, he starts talking about some of these classic blues artists. And there were some songs that he mentioned that I had never heard before. So I looked them up and gave them a listen because I was curious. Now, these are songs that were recorded in the 1930s. I think you could probably guess I wasn't around then.
Right, right.
I never heard them before.
Right.
So by what Chuck said, yeah, it's new music to me. This is new. I've never heard it before. And it's like now it's like, whoa, this is a great find. Like to me, this is like hit status.
Well, I want you, when you go back to your station, I want you to go to your boss, and I want you, when you guys...
You're going to get me fired. I know before you even say...
I want you to go and say, you know, when the Rolling Stones come out with a new song, I want you just to sneak it in and see how it does. I want you to give it a try and see what happens, because I think you still got to introduce these their newer music.
Okay, but here's the deal. You go see an artist like the Stones.
Right.
And if Mick steps out to the front of the stage, goes, okay, now we're going to play a new one. What happens to the audience?
They go get a beer.
Yeah. So there you go.
He knows
and they
that.
are Stones fans. But
Right.
they are Stones fans.
Right.
They paid all that money to go see the Stones.
Right.
They're invested in that show. And Mick says, all right, here's a new one. And then
People kind of look around.
a good section of the audience gets up and walks away.
Right.
Now, when you tune into our radio station, you're a fan of the station. You're a fan of the bands we're playing. But you're not as invested as you are as if you spent all that money to be there. If all of a sudden I go, here, I'm going to play something you don't really know.
But I think you just give them a little taste of it. I think you just give them, you continue to play. Listen, I'm going to program your station. You play your normal songs, but then you sneak, hey, we're going to have a new one by, Aerosmith, and here it is. And you play that track. It's the best track on the album.
But this is where things have changed technology-wise. Because it used to be when you were on the radio, you just on the radio. Right. It's not that way anymore. So now I do social media when I'm on the air. I do blogs on our website. That's the place where I get to introduce people to things. Because the majority of people, sadly, are not interested. And that's been a problem for the music industry, not the radio industry. It's been the music industry. So perfect example. I just spoke to Tom Kiefer the other day. He was the singer-songwriter behind the band Cinderella. Since that's all wrapped up and all these years later and everything, he now has a solo career. He just in September released a new album called Rise. It's brilliant. It's great. And you mentioned the Stones. It's very Stonesy, very much like the Faces. And to me, Tom has never sounded better. He had 7 vocal surgeries because he had all kinds of problems with his voice. His voice has never sounded better. His songwriting's never been better, and it's great. So I'm going to take that interview. I'm going to put it up on the website, and I'm going to put it up with clips of a few of the songs that are on the new album. And I'm going to tell everybody, and I'm going to put it out on social media, and then that's where the people will be able to discover the new music through what we do. It's just another aspect of what we do.
But isn't pop music doing what I'm saying? Because they have to first introduce Taylor Swift or Katy Perry or Beyonce or whoever so they are doing that type of thing by playing the new song.
But not really. Because what happens is, unless it's a major artist in the pop field, like you talked about a Katy Perry or a Taylor Swift. When Taylor Swift says she's releasing a new album,
it's a huge deal.
All the Swifties are like, oh!
And they want to hear it.
And they're dying to hear it. And then it comes out, and hopefully it lives, but possibly it dies. There's a lot of those artists who release songs that don't do well. I mean, it has an initial burst because it's something new. And sometimes it lasts and sometimes it doesn't. Now, there are lesser artists in the pop field who, when they're releasing new music, they're not big artists yet. And it's like, okay, it has to prove itself somewhere along the line. Like maybe somebody's going to play it in a club and they're going to dance to it. And because, okay, hey, all the kids are dancing to this in the clubs, we should put it on the radio because I keep getting requests to play it. And then maybe it'll be given a shot. And then if it does well on the radio, then it'll continue.
So we're probably saying that stations today don't gamble like they used to when we were kids.
Just because it's a whole different thing. It's
more strategic now.
Well, I explain it this way to some people, like this. Suppose you own a deli, all right? And every day you sell 50 ham sandwiches and 50 bologna sandwiches. And you wake up tomorrow and you go, you know what? Look, everybody knows ham's better than bologna. So today when I'm prepping for the day, I'm going to make 75 ham sandwiches and 25 bologna sandwiches. At the end of that day, you will have sold only 75 sandwiches instead of 100, and you're going to have 25 customers who are like, I'm not coming back tomorrow because they didn't have what I want.
Right. Yeah. Well, and you bring up one good point too, is that people have got so many choices now, and it's so easy to flip a radio station off and then switch to whatever. I mean, there's literally 100 choices out there now. So I know it's a lot different than when I was a kid. And you listen to the radio station. I grew up in near Chicago. I listened to stations like The Loop, WLS. And I mean, those stations, WXRT, which was sort of the alternative station at the time. I don't know what they are now. And it was my life. I mean, there was nowhere else to go. The only other choice you had was your album or your 45. Yeah, I'm dating myself. And that was it.
And maybe you put them on cassette.
Or cassette.
You had cassettes and 8-tracks in the car.
When 8-track came along and that you could punch forward a song, it was like we went to the moon. You know, it was unbelievable. But listening to the radio and these guys playing a new song, playing a new song from Pink Floyd or something, it was. I mean, you have no idea what that meant to us.
Okay, but here's how everything changes. How old were you when all that stuff happened?
Probably 13, 14, 15, 16.
So now we talk about the difference between pop music and these rock hits. So the pop music of today, it's all teens.
Right.
That's what they're going for. Most people today want to hear something they know. And that's the majority of people you talk to who are listening to classic rock, classic hits.
Right.
They want to hear stuff they know. They don't want to hear something they don't know. And every now and then people talk to me about stuff, but I see the reality of it. Like, I've had a million people like, well, if you let me come in and play what I wanted to play, you can't believe how many listeners you have. I'm like, look, I've had to come to the harsh reality, and I've had this experiment at different times, is if I was able to get on the radio and just play whatever I wanted to play,
you'd be talking to yourself.
Most of the people who listen to my show are going to turn it off.
Gone.
Because they don't necessarily, and I know that, I realize that. Like, even as a musician, yes, I do my own stuff, but I also go out and we'll play covers.
Right.
So I go out and I do a show, and I have all these great covers, and I have this song that I absolutely love. I think it's going to be great when we play it live, and it's like silence at the end.
Really?
And you're like, wow, I thought that would go over really good. And then it's funny you say this, because I played this one, the first time I played this song, I'll never forget, Gimme Shelter.
Right.
Rolling Stones.
Sure.
First time I played it in a bar, and I'm like, I have to play this song. This is a great song. And I actually even sat in with the band Skin Deep at the post time last night, and we did this. First time I played it with my band, all the people got up and got on the dance floor. And I'm like, you're dancing to Gimme Shelter?
Right.
But I had a packed dance floor.
Kind of an odd dance song.
Right.
Yeah.
But I had a packed dance floor to Gimme Shelter. And I'm like, that's what you want. You want people to get up and move. And that's the song that we play on the air.
Right.
And like, that's it. Like, you see, this is what people want. And it's a physical reaction. They could have done anything they wanted in that bar. They had any choices, and they got up and danced to that song because they loved that song.
I don't care what you say. I'm going to come down to the station and program for you guys. Tell your president I'm coming in next week. I want to. I think you guys still got to play some other songs. But besides that, the radio business, fascinating. I hear so many people. I listen to so many different shows. I hear Howard Stern over the years talking about, terrestrial radio's dead, da 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 da. And I read the trades. It's not dead.
It's not even close to dead.
Why are people saying this? It's
the same reason why people have said rock is dead, and it's really not. If anything, it's more alive than it's been, because there's so much more opportunity to be able to get the music out there. It's just, people go into these things. That's it. You know what? It's like, I don't even know how to tell you. Everybody gets caught up. Somebody writes a headline. Somebody else writes another headline that's similar to that, and then people have this opinion that this is it. But that's just, it's the reality of everything. I just look to see what happens when it's really happening. Just like, we're talking about, what if you played different things, stuff like that. I'm like, yeah, I listen to everybody. And I've watched the arguments. I've watched how we've come upon what we do, so that when people, I'm like, look, I'm not gonna get mad at you. I'm not gonna yell at you. I'm just gonna be like, okay, I understand that. And your perception is 100% the reality for your life.
Right.
I'm like, but I see how this plays out, and I can see how it would play out with you too, where if I put you in this situation. So yeah, there are a lot of people who say, oh yeah, terrestrial radio, like, I don't even listen to that. I'm like, okay, let's get in your car. What do you mean? What are you talking about? Let's get in your car.
Right.
Start your car. And they don't even have to turn the radio on. It's on.
Right.
But they're going to tell me that they don't listen to the radio. But there it is. It's on. Like
Right.
you started your car. You hit the ignition, and I hear music, and it's coming from your radio, and it's coming from a radio station.
Yeah. Well, and I think I was reading I think the numbers, I don't quote me on this, but I think it was like 15 billion in radio revenues in last year or the year before, whatever it was. And I think they're projecting like in the next 10 years, and I know projections can be goofy, but up to maybe like 40 billion the industry. So, there's been times that the industry's been sluggish, but people are still listening to regular, and everyone doesn't have a satellite radio, by the way.
But technology helps us in so many different ways. So you're in your house, and there's a piece of technology that's pretty recent that's been an amazing thing for us. You're in your house, and you're thinking to yourself, you're doing something in the kitchen. Oh, you know what? I'd like to hear some music. Hey, Alexa.
Yeah.
Or okay, Google, and you just say, play 98.9 WMMO.
Right.
Boom, you got it. And you're listening to us doing whatever you're doing. You didn't even have to lift a finger. You can even do it with your phone. You got an iPhone, you got Siri, you got the WMMO app on your phone. Hey, Siri, play 98.9 WMMO. And boom, it comes up. And next thing you know, you're listening to the station. You don't have to, it's everywhere you want to go.
Right.
People are living with their faces in their phones. We're there. That's why we have apps, because it's like we want to be where people are doing stuff. Look, when we were younger, you carried a boombox. You went out to the beach, everybody had a different boombox playing a different radio station or whatever. Now you're playing us on your phone.
Yeah.
The technology made it easier. And nobody goes anywhere without their phone, and nobody goes anywhere without their phone being charged. And like, so it used to be like, I don't know, it takes 10 D batteries and they're dead.
Right.
I don't know if I can afford to buy 10 more D batteries.
Right. God, I remember do you remember the boom boxes?
Absolutely.
Going to the lake with this giant silver, and it got to a point where the bigger the better it seemed. You remember?
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, look at the size of that one, and we'd all just crank them up as loud as you'd be at a beach in California, and there'd literally be like 10 of them, and everyone's playing something different.
Or the moments when you have one of the things that I loved is everybody's got that one road where you grew up where all the kids in high school are cruising up and down the road on like Friday or Saturday night. And one of the best feelings in the world would be you're sitting at a light and you got your windows down and you hear that distinct sound that somebody else sitting at the light has the same station cranked.
Yeah.
And you just look around and it's a brotherhood, and that's what it is. It's a family amongst our listeners. We have that connection today that we know. I mean, nobody drives around with their windows down anymore,
right?
Cranking music.
Not in Florida either.
Yeah. It's too hot.
Too hot. But there is something, right? You're right. You'd hear, and even today, it's got to make you feel good too when you're hearing your own station being blasted out.
Oh, absolutely.
But you look over and we're all listening to the same thing. It's like, yeah.
Well, the other thing that's changed for us too that really gives me a great feeling is that, back when I was listening to radio as a teen, I had no idea what any of these people look like. Now, with the internet, social media, and everything like that, people recognize you. And they'll come up and they'll speak to you and be like, oh, I listen to your show all the time. And I'm like, wow. And sometimes people don't even recognize me by sight. They hear my voice and they recognize me. And that makes me feel good because it's like, I want that connection with the listeners. It's like, I want to be able to talk to you about the things that are important to you because they're important to me.
Right.
And that's the whole thing. Like, we have never met before today.
Right.
We've been in the same place,
right,
but never met.
Right.
And then finally we meet, and instantly right away, we have a connection.
Yeah.
Boom. And it's the music, and we're talking about it, and we could talk about all these things about it. And that's what it's like for the listeners. Like, I'd rather just call them friends. I just haven't met them all yet.
Right.
And that's the whole thing. So I've got all these friends. We love all this music. I get feedback sometimes. If I post something on social media, somebody will comment. Somebody will meet me somewhere, tell me something about it. They'll call in. They'll get me on the phone. If you don't get me on the phone when you call, because I'm always running around the station doing stuff, talk to my assistants, Libby and Corey. They'll give you the message. It's always,
So who did you grow up listening to then on the radio and on albums? And who was your beginning?
The first guy who lit me up was Tom Petty.
Okay.
That was the guy. And then from there, I discovered Springsteen.
Okay.
And that has changed my life to the point where my wife is like, this next thing I'm about to tell you. She's like, I don't know that you want to tell people that. That sounds kind of weird.
Okay.
But I've seen him live over 250 times.
Oh, wow. Serious?
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Well, I've met a lot of fans like this at Stone's concert. They literally travel from city to city, country to country. Did you do that?
I grew up in the Northeast. So Springsteen
natural.
in Jersey.
Right. It's like a religion.
Yeah, well, it's not just that. He would book, so the Born in the USA tour, there was an arena in Jersey, the Brendan Byrne Arena. He had been a governor. And when he toured for the Born in the USA tour, the first leg, he played 10 nights at the Byrne Arena, sold all 10 out. I was at all 10 shows. So right off the bat, in a matter of weeks, I get 10 shows. So then the second leg of the Born in the USA tour, he comes around, he plays Giant Stadium. Okay, that was probably about 5 shows. So we go to those. There's 15. In the midst of that, that's New Jersey. He's going to play New York that's next door. It's easy to get to. Plays Madison Square Garden. You know what? We'll do 8 shows at the Garden. So you go to that, right there. Next thing you know, blink of an eye, 23 shows. You do that for a number of years. You don't even, it's not that I've never seen him anywhere else. I've seen him in D.C. You look at all the different places. I've gone and seen him other places. I went up to see his Broadway show.
How was that?
That was amazing. Absolutely.
So I think that sold out every night too, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was crazy. And the tickets were expensive. And, my wife was very cool about it. She knows, because Bruce and I grew up under similar circumstances.
I like how you say that, Bruce and I. My buddy, Bruce.
Another friend I just haven't met yet. Well,
Yes.
I've played with friends of his.
Gotcha.
So I played with Southside Johnny, and one of my favorite things about that is I gave Southside Johnny a shirt from my band. So they made this movie about Asbury Park, Riot, Redemption, Rock and Roll. And for the movie, Bruce, Little Steven, and Southside Johnny did a concert. Southside Johnny walks out on the stage the night that they do the concert. He's wearing my shirt.
What the
So
hell?
there's Little Steven, Bruce,
you must have just
Southside Johnny.
Were you just like going nuts?
And I'm like, so I found one photographer who got a great picture of him.
Sure.
Like, I want to buy a copy of it for 2 reasons. One, because Johnny's tour manager told me he can get all 3 guys to sign it.
Right.
And because there's an empty spot in between Bruce and Little Steven that's perfect, just enough to Photoshop myself in.
Photoshop. You didn't do that, did you?
I absolutely did not. But it's like
right.
when you're as sane as I am, it's like it looks like a good idea. But the whole point is like we grew up under similar circumstances. So the songs that he wrote connected to me, resonated with me. And then he wrote his book, and I read his book, and it took me deeper into the connection that we have and the similar lives that we lived, which explains why I connected to his music. From there, he did the Broadway show. The Broadway show was like an extension of the book. And then he just recently released his movie, Western Stars, and it's not just a movie. So he performed the album that he just released under that name with an orchestra in his barn, and they filmed that. And then they decided, you know what? We're going to do a spoken intro to all these different songs. And when I listened to the trailer, there's a trailer on YouTube, and I listened to the spoken part that he did and realized that he did an intro for all the songs speaking about them in this way. I thought, this sounds like the next step from the book to the play to the movie. And then he said, when it finally was released and started doing interviews, this was like the completion of a trilogy. And it was. And if you're truly interested in the man behind the music, read the book, now watch the Netflix special of the Broadway play, and then go see this movie.
Right. Bruce is one of those guys that I don't know how you can't like him and his band. I mean, it's just truly one of the greatest, if not the greatest out there. I mean, and I think there's such an appeal for him. Give me your thoughts on this. He's just one of us. He's just that working guy out there cranking it out year after year. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but it's kind of funny because when he opens up his Broadway show on Netflix,
right,
he comes out and he's like, I've never had a regular job in my entire life.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And he's like, I never worked Monday to Friday.
He doesn't really even know what that's
now.
like. Yeah.
He's like, until now, and I don't like it. And he's like,
that's
so
true.
Basically, I made all this up.
Right. Is that what he said?
That good. Yeah, and he laughs. And it's like, you think about it, and you're like, wow.
Yeah, but everyone around the world thinks of him as, kind of working at the steel mill or, you know what I mean?
Right.
But he's never done that.
Right.
That's pretty weird.
Right, but he's the connection's higher than that. Like when I talk about, like he talks about look, the guy's a millionaire, probably even a billionaire. I don't know. I don't pay attention to his finances. I'm not that kind of a fan. But in the 90s, he really started dealing with depression in his life.
Yeah, he talks about that.
And he does. He's very clear about talking about it. And it's not, everyone's like, well, if you had that much money, how could you be depressed? That's not what we're talking about.
No,
we're definitely talking about clinical depression.
Right.
And so the money can't necessarily solve that. And he talks about that more and more, and you can hear it in some of the music he's done, and it's like, wow, that's pretty powerful, and I think that's a great thing to be able to step out and say that, because people always wonder, like, why do we need a celebrity to say, I have this or I've dealt with that?
Right.
It's because you can relate to it and be like, oh, you know what? I can deal with this and still be successful.
Yeah. Well, and depression is one of those things. I think anytime we hear anything about depression, and especially when it comes from a celebrity or somebody that's wealthy, we immediately go, oh, yeah, Mr. Fancy Pants. So what the, really, you've got problems. And you don't realize this is chemicals in your brain that are flowing through differently, and you could be the most wealthy, successful person in the world, like Bruce, and I think you could be sitting at home going, I don't know if I can get out of bed.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can function today. And people just don't realize how serious depression is. Yeah. And if you look in our society with shootings, and people suffer through some horrible things. So yeah, I think he could sit in his mansion and look around and go, this is just not going to be a good day for me.
Yeah. Well, there's two parts of our society that are really important to me, and the depression part really resonates with them, and that's our veterans and our first responders. That's part of the reason why one of the programs that, when I first started at WMMO, they asked me, what's important to you? And I was like, veterans and first responders, and I have this idea. And like, what's that? I'm like, it's First Responder Friday. Every week, I want to say thank you to a different first responder. And some people are like, well, it's a team effort. I'm like, I know it's a team effort. This is my way of trying to walk to every member of the team, shake their hand, and say thank you. And both those portions of our society, our veterans and our first responders, definitely deal with suicide as a result of depression from the things they see that they try and protect us from. There's the staggering statistic for veterans that 22 veterans a day take their own lives.
Isn't that incredible? That's stunning.
Right. And
stunning.
We need to be able to look at depression and other mental illness and not make people feel bad about doing something to get help.
Yeah. Well, maybe one of the answers, and not to get too deep into this, but maybe we got to stop getting engaged in so many battles around the world so people don't end up like this too. Do you ever think about that?
Yeah, it's a tough call when we start to get into areas like that, in political areas.
Well, it's not political. It's just I don't think it is. I think honestly, one of the things veterans are suffering from is PTSD. And the reason they're suffering from this is horrible situations out on the battlefield. That's why they're going through this. So maybe one of the answers is for us as a country to maybe back down on that a little bit and see why we engaged in these wars in the first place.
There's two sides to that coin that are so beyond, and the other thing is that, like,
set me straight, Joe.
Well, no, it's not even that. It's like there's two sides to that coin, and I could discuss both sides of those coin, and I can hear what people are saying. And the problem that I run into is this, and even though we've gotten to this point in our discussion, if I say something that angers somebody, they're going to be like, what's a DJ talking about this stuff for?
Well, because you're a citizen. You're an American citizen.
But you care. But we've heard this before from different people who say artists shouldn't talk about it. All these different people didn't talk about it. But if somebody asks me, that's when I have to look at what's going on and be like, you know what? I have my own thoughts on this subject. And where I'm going to play out my thoughts on this subject is when I walk into a voting booth.
Yeah.
And I don't want to tell people, like, you know what? There's a reason why in the United States, and it's been working for all these years, that when you walk into a voting booth and pull a lever or make a mark on a piece of paper or punch out a hole, that it's always been a secret ballot.
Yeah. But here's what I'm saying, and I don't think it's, I think you're wrong on that. I don't think it's a political thing to say, let's stop getting engaged in so many wars in countries we have no business being there. I think that's just being honest to say. I mean, Ron Paul.
But
hang on.
some people will say.
Well,
but some people will say there is a
F
reason.
them.
And I'm not saying. And I'm
F
saying. Well, you know what? But
Ron-
there's security. But there's security reasons why. Okay, so. You know what?
Well, hang on. I'll say it. Like Ron Paul used to say, older guy. You know who he is?
Yes.
He used to say, regarding Afghanistan, Iraq, and his line I thought was great. We marched in there, so how are we going to get out? We're going to march right out. We're going to march simply right out of it, just like what we did. You can argue whether the way we did it in Syria, we marched out, but we left. We just left. Now, I'm not saying just pull out and not, but what business do we have being in there in the first place?
But you know what? Nobody wants to hear me talk about that.
I do. I want to hear your thoughts. Well, listen, we're trying to solve PTSD.
But you know what? But here's the deal.
How would you say?
You look at the world today, and this is exactly what is something that big that we're dealing with. We're dealing with social media, and more and more, less and less people are listening to actually what you say.
Right.
So it gets condensed. So.
Oh, I think.
But we've also become so much more divided because people just put out a statement on social media and anger so many other people.
Oh, yeah.
And all these different things. And I'm not getting into that fray.
Well,
nobody wants to hear me talk about it. I mean, come on.
do.
Nobody tunes into my radio show thinking to themselves like, I'm going to turn on WMMO today because I want to hear about politics. It doesn't happen.
But you're not on your radio show right now, so you don't have to worry. But here's what I was saying. Like, if you wanted to solve drug overdoses.
Mm-hmm. It's not a simple answer.
Probably the thing to do is to cut back on those drugs, right? And now hang on. So PTSD, same thing. The reason this is happening is we're engaged in so many battles that these people are committing suicide. What'd you say, 22 a day?
22 veterans a day. But this is the whole thing. There are no simple answers to these things. We can't solve them. We can't solve them with a Facebook post. We can't solve them with a 256 character tweet, 280 characters, whatever it is. These are intense, difficult things. If they were simple to solve, we would have solved them.
Well, but
they're not. They're not simple to solve.
Okay.
If they were simple to solve, we would have solved them. There are people on two different sides who have two different ideas, or at least two different ideas of how to solve all these different problems.
But it's not two different sides, though. It's not political. I don't think it is. I think people make it political.
Well, that's the whole thing. But when you start digging down deeper into these things, you find out that it is.
How many Chinese soldiers are committing suicide every day?
Couldn't tell you.
Probably zero.
Why? I don't know. I don't think I would say that. I don't think I would say that.
So because they're not.
I don't know.
They're not engaged in every war around the country.
No idea.
How many British soldiers commit suicide every day?
I was just recently in London, and there is an issue with that.
How many people in Russia?
I couldn't tell you. I don't have those numbers. And that's the whole thing. It's like, and it's like, for me to start talking about this stuff, I'm going to make a comment about something I don't know about.
I don't know what I'm talking about either. But I want. You know what I just want to solve things. I don't want to see 22 people.
You know what? I'd love to see these things solved.
Yeah.
I don't have the answers. Yeah. If I had the answers, I would give them to somebody. If I honestly really believed I had the answers to all these different problems, I would give them.
All right.
I don't.
If we looked at countries that aren't engaged in these wars and they're not committing suicide, could we then...
But we don't know that.
But I'm saying, if we could draw that parallel, could we then draw the parallel if we weren't engaged in those wars, then our guys and gals wouldn't be committing suicide?
But what else don't we have in common with that? How do we know it's not some other reason why that's not happening?
Well, we know it's guys coming from the battlefields, right? Mainly from war zones that die each day?
I honestly don't know that.
Okay.
I honestly don't know that. That's the whole thing. Is like we start talking about these things. I don't know the answers.
You just want to talk about Springsteen.
You know what? I'm a musician. That's what I want to talk about.
So do you remember the days when you first started listening to Springsteen and when you first started listening to music?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know your age, but I remember when albums would come out. You mentioned this a little bit earlier. That was my only way of seeing a rock star. That was my only way of seeing a pop star. Is we'd get an album, you'd look at the back of the album, and there were pictures, and there were like liner notes.
Yeah.
and there were notes about the band, you know, and this is how I learned about music. I would sit home winter nights in Chicago just listening to
Headphones on.
I mean, it was my life. And just to learn about Springsteen, and there'd be a couple photos, and I miss that. It was really cool.
Yeah.
Did you do that, or did you?
Absolutely, without a doubt. With all these different artists, that was like the greatest thing to me. And reading interviews in Rolling Stone magazine back
sure.
when Rolling Stone was really Rolling Stone.
Yeah.
And
I mean, back when you were a kid, there weren't rock videos, right? I mean, there wasn't MTV in that when you.
It came in, yeah.
Okay.
It came in when I was a kid, absolutely.
Okay.
I can still remember when it first came on, and I felt like for the first 48 hours I didn't leave the TV.
Right. Well, here's what I'm trying to say. When I was young, there was no way to see your favorite artist. There was a couple of shows. There was one thing called the Midnight Special, which came out on like Friday or.
Then it was Don Kirshner's rock concert.
Right.
Then Saturday Night Live would have rock bands.
Right. That was a
even
big
more so,
deal.
ABC TV for a while tried to compete with that, and they had Fridays.
Friday night videos or something.
No, they just had a show called Fridays, which was like Saturday Night Live, but on Friday.
Do you know who was on that show?
The Clash.
Well, no. Star-wise. Wasn't it Kramer was on there as?
He was on there at one point. Larry David was one of the.
Went and saw that show live.
They used to have the one woman who I loved then, Melanie Chardoff, who used to do the news from a hot tub.
Yeah, remember that? There was some little skit too. Do you remember that on Fridays about going to take a pill? Got to take a pill.
And then there was the chef who made everything with ganja.
Ganja, yeah. I don't know why that show didn't click. It was good.
I think it was
too much like
trying to be Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
And they did it on another night trying to steal the thing. But they had good acts, and the acts played longer. So I remember the first time I saw The Clash was on Fridays.
And they would play a long time. Do you remember that?
They'd play a few different songs, and you can still find the clips of that on YouTube. And it was, to me, it was great. You know, the band was just...
Yeah, and then Saturday morning, this is going way back when I was super young, was and then you had American Bandstand, and that's where you would actually see. It was mainly pop artists, you know, the Madonnas, the Michael Jackson.
They had rock artists on,
but
from time to time, and they'd have weird ones. Like I can still remember seeing. I don't know why this clicks. The Boomtown Rats.
I love the Boomtown Rats.
And they were on, and that's the song they did. But what they did is the whole band just sat there behind Bob Geldof, who got up and lip synced the song.
Did he lip sync it?
And they weren't even with instruments; they were just sitting on the floor.
Right.
And he got up and lip synced it.
Yeah, you're right. They did have kind of an eclectic group. It was a lot of pop stars and kind of, I don't know what you and I would call like bubblegum pop stars at the time. But then every now and then they would have like a rock person coming in. It almost felt odd. It was like, and then people are trying to dance.
And the whole thing was every time they were like, let's rate a record.
Right.
It was the same answer.
Yeah.
It has a good beat and you can dance to it.
I give it an 8. People don't even know that show. It was great though. It was fun.
That was Dick Clark.
I want to bring back a dancing show. I think people love to watch people dance. I think somebody out there. Oh yeah.
I don't know about that.
We would. Don't you remember watching that show and watching couples dance?
You do the show. I will tune in and check it out.
I'll have you DJ. I'll have you DJ in the show. We'll bring a version of that back. So who else did you grow up listening to then? Springsteen, Tom Petty,
and then there was the punks. Clash, big time.
Wow.
December 1979, they released London Calling.
Yes.
My birthday's in December. For Christmas that year, my sister and my now ex-brother-in-law got me the album, and it was a double album. And every single song, I listened to it over and over and over and over.
That was a band.
Yeah. Oh, they were monsters. And I was a huge Joe Strummer fan. And after the Clash split up and Joe went solo, I loved all his stuff, and I'm still heartbroken over the fact that we lost him.
Wow, it's people forget that era, that late 70s, early 80s, the punk and disco clash kind of that was going on in our society. Do you remember this?
Absolutely.
And this was also an era.
Wasn't it in Chicago where they had the big problem where they were going to do the record burning or the record explosion or whatever?
Joe, I was on my way to disco demolition night at Comiskey Park. I was on the freeway, and what it was is WLUP radio.
Yeah.
You bring a record, and you get in for 98 cents. And Steve Dahl, the disc jockey from The Loop, was taking all those records. He put them in a giant container, and to blow up disco records. He did some really funky things. He went, I think it was like Alpine Valley or Poplar Creek in Chicago. He had marshmallows printed on them. Disco sucks, and they dropped them from helicopters at disco concerts. There was this big battle. Back in the day, you couldn't like more than one genre of music. I don't know if you know this.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know where you grew up on the East Coast.
Yeah.
You could not like Donna Summer and Bruce Springsteen. You either had to
Right.
be dedicated to one or the other.
And it's very funny that you picked those two because Bruce wrote a song that Donna Summer recorded.
Is that right?
Yes.
You could not admit to other people that you liked an Olivia Newton-John song or whatever frickin' was hot. You couldn't like The Clash and like
Black Sabbath.
Black Sabbath. You couldn't do it. And it was a weird era in that. And I remember you're talking about punk rock. It was such a big influence. Like even you look back at a band like U2. U2 was a punk band when they first started.
Yeah, absolutely.
You could go look at early and listen to their music, the way Bono and the Edge were dressed. It was a punk band.
Yeah.
It was an Irish punk
Well,
band.
it's so funny how you say that because things have changed. And it's like, if you know the song 1985 by Bowling for Soup, and they're like before Motley Crue was classic rock.
Right.
And when MTV played music. And it's all those things because it was like little by little things changed. Like when Motley Crue came out, it was like, they're metal.
Right.
And then they became classic rock along the way.
Right.
And like, if you listen to their records, you go, that's not metal if you compare it to the metal today. You listen to, like, I talk to people and like, a lot of these metal artists were inspired by Zeppelin. I'm like, Zeppelin's not metal. I'm like, Zeppelin was the hardest thing around.
It's just a hard rock band. Wouldn't you classify that?
But metal really didn't exist like during Zeppelin's time. It came out more. And then you listen to the first wave of metal bands and you listen to people like Judas Priest. And then you put that next to some of the metal bands today and you're like, all right, it's still good.
Right.
But it's nowhere near as heavy as that.
Right.
And, some of the stuff that's metal today, I'm like, okay, that's a little too heavy for me.
Right. Right. You're right. Metal sort of kind of started collecting bands to expand its genre.
But even still, like,
Is that fair?
back in the day, you wouldn't play Judas Priest on a classic rock station.
No.
Because they were a metal
band.
Right. And that was like too far out. Like a lot of radio stations had specialty metal shows like, we'll play them on the metal show, but we're not going to play them on, 2 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon.
So who is the greatest metal band out there? I'm going to put you on the spot. Is that a
Greatest metal band
Metallica?
out there?
Ozzy?
It's almost going to be, I might go with Motorhead.
Really? Now, why is that?
Lemmy was one of a kind.
I didn't know much.
And he
I didn't know
care.
much about him.
Yeah, well, here's the one thing that a lot of people miss. Before he was in Motorhead,
Right.
he was a roadie for Hendrix.
A roadie. So
Yeah.
he was pushing Marshall
amps and yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
And then how does he switch his career like that? All of a sudden he just...
Most roadies, most guys who work on road crews are musicians.
Okay.
They're just not super successful ones, so they get a job in the industry. That's the job. And you just keep playing, and you never know. And the funny thing is about a guy like Lemmy was he was influenced by Hendrix, who he worked for, but he was a really big rockabilly fan. And he did albums with some of the guys from a band called the Rockettes that was around in the 80s, and some of the guys from the Stray Cats, and they got together. Was it Headcat? I think they had a band that was called Headcat. And they did like all these Elvis covers and stuff like that, but they did them like metal punk versions of all these rockabilly covers. That I loved it. It was fantastic. So to me, that's what the Ramones were.
Right.
I'm not a total Ramones fan. I'm so glad that I'm not like dealing with the like. If you're listening to the Ramones, you can also listen to ABCD.
Right.
Because I love the Ramones. I got to meet some of the original members. I played with some of friends with CJ Ramone, who was the bass player for the final version of the band and one of the only guys who also got to sing for the band aside from Joey and wrote songs for them. And it's like there's so many different bands. There's just something so cool about what they do. And You know.
Yeah, I want to go back to that punk era though. It was a weird time when that was sort of fading out. The punk era and then the disco, and it was a weird
Well,
time.
that's when post-punk came up and all these different categories. I'm like, it's rock. Come on.
But I like that punk era. I like the whole look, and the sound, and the even the beat of it all. I thought it was a neat time.
I had a mohawk at one point.
Did you really?
A real one.
Wow, you were. Was that inspired by the Clash or something?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if you see the Clash at Shea Stadium opening for the Who in '83, and I was at those shows, and Joe Strummer, I remember him coming out on stage with a coonskin cap on, and then they took the coonskin cap on, and he had a mohawk, and I'm like, I am totally doing that.
Yeah.
As soon as I can avoid my parents long enough to get that done.
Yeah. Don't you remember the whole look with the safety pin in the nose and the hair and the mohawk and the thin ties and
well, that was kind of a cross between new wave and punk, the thin ties, and that's.
And I probably am crossing that over with new wave.
Well, there was a lot of kind of
because the Clash was punk.
Kind of thing.
The Clash got the street cred of this is a punk band.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
And then,
there was so many like. Punk and new wave fit together better than anything else did, and a lot of people would kind of accept the truly punk purists.
Right.
Well, that's not really punk.
Right.
You know, and
it's not Sid Vicious or something. Yeah. Any genre of music you cannot stand? I mean, even looking back in history, or even something that's today.
Smooth jazz, maybe, but other than that,
you got
real
jazz.
Do
that again.
Smooth jazz.
Welcome. Good evening, everyone.
Yeah, you know, there's different parts of jazz I love. I love country. There's a lot of country artists I love, from new stuff to classic stuff. Johnny Cash. My band even covers some stuff from Johnny Cash. Obviously, we talked about the punk stuff I dig. There, you can pull out a couple disco tunes I love. There are some rap tunes I like. If it's a good song, it's a good song, and it doesn't matter to me what genre it is.
So, guys that do what you do for a living, anybody you really have idolized or can't stand out there? What announcers did you kind of grow up or sort of leech to as you were thinking about the business?
Well, I'll have to give a shout out to a guy who's now a buddy of mine who's living out in San Diego, out there, Bob Buckman. This is like the guy who I first heard, when I was in high school, listened to that every day.
Was he on that X station down there? Or?
No, he was actually on up in the Northeast when I was growing up, and every morning I'd get up and, getting ready to go to school, high school, the clock radio would go off, and, I'd have Bob on.
Was he a morning guy?
He was a morning guy, and as years gone on, we got to meet each other, we got to know each other. I consider him a friend. And then there were guys.
Wait, go back to him. Did he do his name's Bob?
Yeah, Bob Buckman.
Buckman. Now, did he do a lot of radio bits in the morning and stuff and callers?
He was the first guy I heard who would do the question of the day.
Okay.
And he always had some kind of brain teaser kind of question he'd throw out there, and he'd take calls and try and figure out if you were right. And it wasn't even I don't even remember if there was a prize or not. It was just he would play all the people who answered on the air. And it was whether or not you got it was just a badge of honor. Who cared? I got through. He played me on the radio. That was great.
Right.
I'm calling tomorrow.
So he inspired you a little bit.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of guys who did, but this is where things get kind of weird. There's a lot of guys who inspired me, who I absolutely love listening to on the radio. And then you get into the industry and you meet them or you learn more about them.
Don't ever meet your idols. There's some truth to that.
One of the best statements I ever heard was trust the art, not the artist.
Okay.
And I'm okay, because there were guys who I absolutely really loved listening to.
So who else did you like, though? I mean, who else did you like? I mean,
all right, there was this other guy completely whacked out crazy on the radio.
Okay.
Vin Scelsa.
Okay.
And Vin...
Was he in one market or all over the country?
I think he was all over. I had a syndicated show, Idiot's Delight.
Okay.
And I can still remember driving one night. Two things I remember about it. The first time I ever really got into his show, I turned him on, and he's talking about how he's reading this book. And essentially, he's a music show. Okay. He's not a talk show. Just know that from there. And he's like, here, I got to read you part of the book. What? And he starts reading the book on the air and doing
for a long
voices
time?
for the different characters.
Oh.
He must have read a couple pages of the book. And I'm like...
like a radio no-no?
And I'm like... I was glued to it. I'm like, this is insane.
Right.
But I couldn't turn it off. I was like glued to it. And I remember another night he had Laurie Anderson, who was Lou Reed's wife,
Okay.
on the show. And they start talking about dead air, which is like, if you want to get fired in radio, have dead air. And a lot of radio stations have an alarm that will go off after maybe 30 seconds or 60 seconds.
Is that right?
If there's no sound.
Oh. What does it do? Just go to a break or something?
No, it'll like set off an alert. Like I know, like at my station, if I'm off the air for 60 seconds, the engineer is going to get a text because they don't know why you're off the air. They don't know why.
Right. Maybe you had a heart attack and died.
Right. So that's why, like, all of a sudden we have to alert people. Texts go out, things like that.
Wow.
Okay. So they start talking about it because, one night I had a guest on the show and he's like, we just decided to be quiet for 30 seconds because then it was like an audible alert.
Right.
Like a bell that started dinging like old fire alarms. He's like, and we decided to be quiet for 30 seconds to make the alarm go off.
Right.
And Lori's like, really? You want to do that tonight? And they did. And they sat, and I'm glued to the radio to dead air.
Right.
It's complete silence. And I'm glued to the radio for 30 seconds.
You couldn't believe they were doing this.
And if you were to just set a timer for 30 seconds, you would not believe how long that is.
Right.
And for 30 seconds, they were quiet. And I was glued to it. I couldn't turn it off. I mean, that to me, like, I don't know how he did compelling radio like that.
It was almost like 1940s or 50s radio where they were really drawing you in.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He was a master. I don't think I could never do what he did, and I would never.
Well, you couldn't get away with it now.
Yeah,
it's different. Anybody else like names that you've idolized, disc jockeys?
Well, that's that. You see, so there was a guy who I really liked listening to, and towards the end of his career, his personal life became a mess that made headlines that made me Dave Herman. And in later years of
is he from New York? Or?
Yes,
okay.
And his personal life became a mess that made headlines and.
What do you do?
He was like,
just tell me the headline.
He was like going to another country to meet a girl who was underage.
Underage girls,
like significantly underage.
I gotcha.
And I'm like,
yeah.
Not that if it wasn't significantly underage, it wouldn't have been bad. But just like
if it's bordering,
to me, it just made it worse.
Right.
It made it even worse.
Right. Was he single or?
And I was like,
married?
I honestly don't remember. But I'm like, this is a guy who I was a fan of.
Right.
And I liked his radio show. And then I heard that, and I'm like,
he had another side.
Yeah, I'm not really. So that's what I said. Like you get into the industry. There's people you listen to and you like, and then you get into the industry and you find out more. And I didn't even need to get into the industry to find that out. And I was like,
morning radio was always a big appeal to me. Morning disc jockeys. I look back on it, and I give those guys so much credit. That is not easy to.
No.
First of all, get up that time. Okay, people don't realize how early it is. Number two, to be entertaining, and to be entertaining, people don't think about this. To be entertaining without real writers, like you don't realize, like when you watch Jimmy Kimmel or anyone else.
Oh yeah,
they got a team of 6 to 12 writers writing those materials.
Conan O'Brien got his start as being a writer.
But you work in local radio as a morning guy, and you've got a huge audience.
You listen to Denise Ryan, who does mornings on WMMO, and like when she gets up in the morning, first of all, she's getting up early in the morning.
What time does she get up?
It's got to be at least like 4. Has to be
at least 4. That's not even bad, right?
Because the next thing she has to do, she has to get up. She's got to get to work, and then you have to know everything that happened between the time the world went to bed and when they woke up this morning.
Right.
Because you're their first contact with the world. So if something totally crazy happened last night, you need to let them know.
Right. Are there still stations, though, with morning DJs, morning jocks that aren't really playing music? I suppose it would be like the Stern.
It's the format. There's talk formats out there, but
in the morning, they're not playing music.
We our sister station WDBO news station, and
I love that kind of. I grew up listening to people like Steve Dahl. I mentioned that. I'll even date myself, Larry Lujak. Is that a name you know?
I recognize the name, but I couldn't give you any info on him.
Jonathan Brandmeier, brilliant in the morning. I mean, just a talent. Jonathan Brandmeier, if he ends up listening to this, should have been on SNL. Should have been a cast member on SNL. Talented singer, writer, producer, just funny guy. And then, like even back when I was living in Chicago, we'd get tapes of Howard Stern, and I just
You see, I have to say this in all honesty, I was never a Howard fan.
really.
Yeah. And even now that he's going through his whole change and he's Mr. Nice Guy,
I
just
can I tell you something? I have loved Howard since the late '70s, but now that he's gone through this change and says that really wasn't me,
Yeah.
like that's weird to me. That's strange, and it is, because then if it wasn't you, then it was all a sham.
Yeah.
Am I taking that wrong?
I don't even know how to do it because it's like honestly, it seems like a crime when you work in radio to be like, yeah, I'm not a Howard fan, and
No.
I just never paid enough attention to him.
I thought
then or now to
Yeah.
be able to speak with any authority. It's like I listened and was like, yeah, I don't really like this.
That's funny because of where you grew up. See, I thought he was so creative in terms of introducing an audience to things that never had been done on the radio. And I think it's hard, especially too, when he had the FCC breathing down his back, and you know this in radio, you say one thing today and,
Yeah.
he just wasn't afraid to do
Well,
it.
the one thing that I always thought was crazy with him, and this is something that people don't realize, is that in order for you to lodge a complaint with the FCC, you have to have a recording of what you're complaining about.
Right.
So,
Well, a lot of
there were all these people who hated Stern,
Right.
who would tune in every day and tape his entire show,
Right.
in case he said something, so
Right.
they could complain.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That to me is like, what kind of level of hatred do you have to have for
Well,
somebody to
there
do
were a lot of church groups and different religious leaders that were doing this. They were breathing down, and I always give credit. You know, who I give credit to, not even just
If you
Howard.
don't like it, do what I did. I put on a music station.
Right.
Stern was there. I didn't like what he's doing. I wanted to rock. I put on the rock
Well,
station.
that's what he always said. Just turn it off. But I always give credit to the management too. I can't imagine the calls and the FCC and the letters they must have gotten every day, and to stand up and say, nope, we're defending him. We're defending what we're doing on this station. I give them credit
I'm
for
sure
doing
they're
that.
defending what they were doing because they were making money.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's no question about it. And the only thing that I always thought was weird about his show when it was like that, before it was on Sirius, that, and this is going to sound a little corny, but there always should have been some warning to when he started his radio show. Hey, kids shouldn't be listening to this, because I always thought his
That's going to encourage kids to listen more.
well,
and,
but it was kind of like, okay, it's sort of X-rated at times, but you can just turn on a radio and get it. Where the guy that had sort of an X-rated show, he couldn't show it because he wasn't allowed to do it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I always thought it was weird. He was a little hypocritical in the sense of, hey, this is probably not for everyone. Because people would be flipping the stations and here, they're throwing pieces of bologna on women's asses.
Well, to me, this is where he killed it, because the stations that he was on, I was just like, I'm not even gonna go near that button because I just don't care. And so I would not even think of them. I'd have my presets, and I don't even know if they'd be in my presets, because I'm like, if I turned them on for a second, I'd be like, oh, this guy again,
Right?
Because I heard him before he was the king of all media. He was on radio where I was, and
Right.
I just wasn't interested.
I just thought some of that stuff. I like too that he wasn't in bed with celebrities like he is today, in the sense of those are his buddies.
Yeah.
Those were his enemies, or he pretended they were his enemies, and it was funny stuff when they would send like Stuttering John out somewhere and just disrupt a press conference. Oh my! And
the worst thing in the world for me was, the one thing that I remember that he showed up at something is Ringo was doing a
Ringo Starr
press conference somewhere, and they pick on Stuttering John to ask a question. He's like, yeah, Stuttering John, the Howard Stern show, wanted to know what you did with the money. And Ringo's like, what money? He's like, the money for singing lessons. I'm like, really? You're gonna do a sophomore gag like that on a Beatle?
Right, on a Beatle. Right. Of all people, don't pick on a Beatle. Pass on the Beatle. Go get a third-rate.
But to me, it was a sophomoric thing.
But
it's like, that's the kind of stupid joke that I did when I was like, It's like I'm 12 years old with my friends, and those are the kind of jokes we told. I'm like, come on.
And then it got to a point when he would be out on doing that at a press conference, and as soon as they realized, the PR person, and it's usually some 27, 28-year-old female who then realizes, uh-oh. And then when they would escort him out, okay, you got to leave. Well, I've got another question. I thought it was funny. I thought it was creative stuff, and I had never heard that kind of stuff on the radio. I'm not sure you could. Well, he's kind of late. He's kind of not going in on that angle anymore.
Well,
is
the
he?
whole problem is that everybody who came after him tried to take it more extreme.
Right.
And the more extreme that people got,
Opie and
the
Anthony.
more, yeah. And I mean, I was listening on the day they did the thing that got them taken off the air.
The church.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it was like, what are you guys doing?
Yeah.
Like, to me, there's so many other things that you can do.
Right.
You know, like, to me, like, what I love is I love all these stories about music. What we started out,
right?
We've gone through telling all these different things about music and talking about all these different bands and everything. That's what I dig doing.
Right.
This is really cool. This is what, this is what jazzes me up. This is what makes me want to go, is all this stuff about music and all these great rock tunes and everything like that, from the punk bands to this to that, all that stuff. I don't care about crazy jokes and crazy gags. Like, I'm not a guy who's getting on the air being like, oh, so what bit are we going to do today?
Yeah.
I'm not doing a bit. I'm being me. I'm not going to come out 5 years down the road and be like, you know what? That really wasn't me on the radio.
That's the
This
part
is
to
me.
That's the part to me that's weird now to hear him say that, because then it's like, so then what was all this? It was just a complete sham. That's the only thing that pisses me off about it now.
It was him trying to make a career and make a buck, and I get that. It's entertainment.
Right.
But that's not the way I do it. My whole thing is like, I want to do this. I want to be me. Like I said, like when we sit around and we talk, it's like, we met, we instantly had a connection. We're friends. That's the way I think about everybody who's listening. They're my friends.
Right.
And these are the things that I talk about with my friends. So, I see a great movie that has something to do with music, I'm going to tell you about it. I hear a new record, like, I was talking about the Tom Kiefer thing, heard a record, thought it was great. I sought out the interview with him. They didn't come to me. I was like, get me him on the phone so we can interview, so that I can tell my friends about it. All these different things. That's what it is. This is me living my life. I'm just lucky, and I value the fact that there are people out there who want to be my friend and care about the same things I care about.
So you were mentioning idols that never. I had said, don't meet your idols. Anybody you met and you just were, come on, you can tell me. Just one person that you were just like, either disc jockey or music wise.
I hate to speak ill of the dead, but that being said, when people ask this question, the guy who immediately pops in my mind, who I met through radio, who was a singer for a band, who I was absolutely like, whoa, was Kevin Dubrow, the late singer from Quiet Riot.
Really?
I met him in the 90s.
All right.
And
where were you? Concert or?
Backstage at a show.
Okay.
And he was playing a little club because the band has gone through some ups and downs. They were at a down sweep, and what a jackass.
So you meet him, you go out and shake his hand.
Right. We're backstage. We meet him because, part of a show, blah, blah, blah. And we go in there, we meet him, and he's just like ripping on every other band in the world. Look, your band isn't now not as successful as they were because of all these other bands. If you're not as successful as you were now, it has probably more to do with you than, he's like, well, everybody makes fun of all these 80s bands and this, and that, and the other thing. And first of all, I'm like, they're not making fun of all the 80s bands. They may be making fun of you, but you've made some weird choices. They played like...
were you doing an interview with them, or were you just...
We were going to do one, and then I was like...
Really?
I had some partners at the time, and I'm like, if you guys want to interview him, you can, I'm out. Because he was like, they had played a nudist colony. They had like, it was like, look, you look at the videos, the early videos, and the guy's losing his hair. I know what it's like. I mean, hey.
Handsome man. Handsome Joe.
I know what it's like to be losing your hair. Yeah, I get it. But he went and got like a wig or a hairpiece or something at the time that we were talking to him. And he's like, and he's like, you look at these bands like Pearl Jam and everything, like, everybody's going to see how cheesy they are one day. What are you talking about, man? Like,
right. Do you think maybe he was just self-conscious? Maybe he was going through like a weird...
I don't know, but it was just...
And maybe you just caught him at a weird...
That's always possible too, but it was just so intense.
Right.
Like, there are some people who I met who I know, like, I met Brian Setzer, big fan.
Seems like a good guy.
First time I met him was at the 80s, and it was kind of like, I think that was a bad instance. And then I met him,
Yeah.
years later, and he was much more gracious and much nicer.
Right. Yeah, and it's hard when you meet your favorite rock star, and it depends at the moment. Even if you're going to do an interview, like you had said even earlier, it depends how many interviews they've done. They're tired. They're sick of the same stupid questions that I'm going to. I years ago I got to do an interview with McCartney, Paul McCartney, and I sat knee to knee with him. And the first question I asked him is, I said, is there anything I could ask you that you haven't been asked? And he looks at me and in his English accent, which I'm not going to do, and he goes, "Nope, but you can try." And
I love his honesty on that.
And I think I only got like a 15-minute interview with him or whatever it was. But I mean, I realized there's nothing new I'm going to reveal. What the F am I going to reveal in this interview?
You know what? You never know. I mean, my goal every time that I'm prepping to do an interview with somebody is I want them to say to me, "Wow, that's a good question." And I actually, it's going to be funny when I tell you this now. So I'm interviewing Roger Waters from Pink Floyd. And they tell me before the interview, do not talk to him about politics.
Oh, that's right.
Because he will go on and on.
And go on.
And won't stop.
Right.
So don't talk to him. So I'm like.
You're thinking about it.
So I'm like.
You're sitting there thinking about it.
I have to ask him something. So I never write down a
list
full,
of questions.
complete question.
Right.
I will put
Just a
bullet
thought.
points.
Sure.
I want to talk about this, talk about that.
Right.
And I make a lot of them because sometimes
you just forget.
In my head, it's one question.
Right.
And I ask one question, and they answer 7 questions with the one. They answer to the one. So I construct this question that was somewhere along the lines of, your work has always been very political. And in this day and age, many people say that they don't think artists or celebrities or athletes should ever comment on political things. What do you think your responsibility as an artist is in regard to that?
Uh-oh. What did he launch into?
And he started going. And he gave me a great quote that I have somewhere that I'm actually going to be putting together a little video clip of him with the quote and everything that's going to go up on his birthday and stuff on social media. And he's just answering it. He's going on and on. It's brilliant. It's profound and everything. And in the middle of it, because it's a phone interview, they're like, this is your heart out. And if you're not ready to finish the interview, we're going to come on and cut you off. And the guy comes on, the producer on his end is like, all right, Roger, we have to wrap this up. And Roger's like, I'm not done yet.
I've got a lot more to say to him. Yeah, he gets real political, right?
Yeah, but it was.
What year was that? What year was this roughly?
This is when he released his most recent album, so it was just a few years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
But to me, it was great because it was like it really. He told me what he felt his responsibility was. We didn't actually talk about anything on either side, and then people know. It's like, or you should know by now.
Well,
this is Roger Waters. He has very distinct beliefs that he talks about.
I think pop stars and rock stars have to be careful about politics and sensitive subjects because it usually doesn't do them any good to answer these things because it's like so many issues. Now you've alienated maybe half your crowd.
Right. Well,
for
you
what?
were talking to me before, and just like I said, it's like,
well, Joe,
nobody wants to hear me talk about that.
I'm coming over to the station and I'm programming the station. We're changing everything as soon as I get over there. No, you do have to be careful. But I think I like in your position, I don't like the fact that that people can't listen to you on the radio and you can't have an opinion about something. And I don't like that.
It's not that I can't. This is the problem. People don't listen to the whole statement.
Yeah.
People will hear half of what you said and assume the rest. And I don't like that. I don't ever want to be in a position where I have to. Here's a perfect example. I'll give you this, and people never listen to the whole way through. I try not to make snap judgments and listen all the way through to find out what's going on. You probably remember an episode of Saturday Night Live. Talented singer from Ireland, Sinead O'Connor, goes on the air.
Sure.
She goes to do a song, takes up a picture of the Pope, rips it in half, says, fight the real power or something like that.
Yep.
They ask her later, and most people didn't listen beyond the ripping of the Pope. There's absolutely no reason why you should do that. Didn't make sense at all. Don't understand. Never listened for the answer. So they asked her, why did you do that? She said, because the Catholic Church is actively covering up abusive children by priests.
Yeah.
And I remember her saying that. I said, okay. How many years ago did that happen? And then look at what we have discovered from then till now.
She was completely right.
So not making any judgments and just reserving it and going, okay, she gave an answer. I don't know. That sounds kind of out there that they would be doing that. But then we discovered they were.
Yeah. People, oh my God, I remember that so well. People lost their minds.
Oh yeah,
It killed her career.
It was just a couple of weeks after that they had the Bob Dylan anniversary concert at Madison Square Garden, and she was booed off the stage.
To this day?
Oh no, this was a few weeks after that event. After that event.
Is she still out performing?
I believe so, but she's dealt with, and I think a lot of part of this was, she's dealt with a lot of mental illness in her life over the years. And I feel that a lot of it stemmed from the fact that somewhere along the way in interviews, she's talked about the fact that she was abused. And I think that's what made her want, and you could kind of see some of it, like the reason behind her shaving her head. And everyone's like, I don't get this. What is it?
I remember.
She didn't want her career to be made
judged
on her
on
appearance. She didn't want to become a star because she was attractive.
Yeah.
She wanted to become popular because her music and her art was deemed worthy.
Yeah. Well, you know what happens though? The problem becomes with these types of things, tearing up the Pope's picture, the hair, then these issues become the focus and then not your music. That's the only problem when you take positions and stuff. Oh, she's the rock star that does this, or he's the rock star that is a Democrat, or he's the rock star that's a Republican, and immediately you alienate so much of your audience, and it's not worth it as a rock star.
It's just, well, you know what it is? It's like I've said, and a lot of people think, you know what? For me personally, I wouldn't mind talking to some of these artists about what their beliefs are.
I want you to go on the air and be more opinionated. I want you to change tomorrow.
But the whole point is that, like, I'd love to have the conversations with these people because I know I'm going to listen and I'm not going to make a snap judgment, and I'm going to try and dig down deep. And I'm not saying I'm not going to disagree with them. Plenty of artists I probably would.
Right.
But I know the issue today is that people aren't listening. So I could say something with you now, and no matter how much I have taped that you can roll it back and listen to exactly what I said, people are going to say I said something different.
No, we've moved into some weird times, and you have to admit this is at what you do. You do, especially the type of work you do. You got to kind of watch your P's and Q's out there when you're on there. You can't be Howard Stern on your show.
Right.
You just can't.
Right.
I mean, people are going to pick you apart. So don't you think everyone sort of in the radio business has to drive down the middle of the road now?
You know what? Everybody has to make the decision for themselves.
Well, if they want to have a long career.
But they have to look at what they want their career to be. For me, it's like I said. I want my friends talking about music. That's what I'm here for. That's what I do. And if I get involved in any of this other stuff that's aside from that, and it's not saying I don't have my opinions or whatever, but I know it can too easily get messed up between coming out of here and going in here for other people. I don't want that.
Yeah, well,
so that's where I'm not going to go.
Well, and it's not fair to, like, I think about like morning DJs who've got 4-hour shifts to fill and be entertaining. I think this about stand-up comedians. It's messy at times, and it's not easy.
Yeah, but you know what? But that's where the work comes in. That's where the talent comes in. That's where you see what the people have. You know, like being the background of his personal life that came out in the years afterwards, that having nothing to do with his career and his talent. Bill Cosby had a successful stand-up career for years.
He was amazing.
And he never even cursed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he was able to work that well to be that successful.
Well, Seinfeld does the same thing.
Right. So it's like I look at that stuff and I'm like, so all these guys like, well, you know, sooner or later you're going to blah, 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 blah. You know what? Maybe that works for you. And I'm not saying that you're not talented to some degree, but I look at these guys who work really hard and they can be successful and not have to do those things. So you can't tell me it's a necessity to do it in the business.
Right.
It's an option and you chose that option.
Right.
Own it.
Right.
You know, I have options of what I can do in my career, and I've chosen my options, and I'm happy with that, and I live with that. And every night I go to sleep, and I'm fine with that. And you know, it's like, to me, like, I have clips that I can play from all these different artists that are answers to really great questions.
Right.
Because I worked my ass off.
Right.
before I interviewed them, I know, hey, I'm going to get 10 minutes to sit down and talk to Paul to Roger Waters.
Right.
You got 15 minutes with McCartney. I
Right.
know you sat down. That was a brilliant first question.
Right.
Because sometimes I'll ask people, is there something you always wished that you would have been asked that you never were?
Well, I'll tell you another funny McCartney story too. At that same show, when you work for a news station, if you get press credentials, you can usually shoot the first couple of songs. They usually kick you out after the second or third song.
Yeah.
So, I think we were in Kentucky, Lexington, I think, in fact, maybe. Anyway, so they were going to do a sound check, as you know, the band will always do, and so I'm kind of standing there and I'm waiting, and there wasn't a lot of people around, and my photographer was getting his gear or something. I'm just kind of sitting waiting. I'm not far from the soundboard. And this girl walks over, and I said, "Oh, hey, how you doing? Gonna be a good show." And I'm just making small talk because I got no one to talk to. I'm kind of, looking up at the ceiling, and I go, "Oh, do you know the band well, or do you know?" Yeah. And she goes, "Yeah, I know them pretty well." And a real nice smile and cheerful. And do you work with someone from the band? And I could just tell she was hesitating. And then she started asking me a couple questions. Yeah, I work for one of the stations. Blah blah blah. And I go, "Well, who are you connected to the band?" And she goes, "Paul's my dad." It was Stella McCartney.
Okay.
I looked at her and went, "Oh, yeah, okay. I'm gonna go get our video gear and set up over here." I could just tell she just didn't even want to say a word. She didn't even want to, I don't want.
You don't want to say the wrong thing.
Yeah,
but, you're real.
But that's my dad. That's my father. He's a Beatle, which was kind of cool. Yeah. And then look at what she ended up doing.
Yeah.
Successful.
Nice, a very successful career.
A couple things I want to talk about before we get out of here. Okay. When the music business changed, Napster, did it just...
Before that.
Well, I'm talking about music being downloaded.
Before that. That was the result of decisions that the record companies made earlier on. So, late 80s, record companies decide, we're going to be moving into CDs. And we want to make more money.
And by the way, remember how we were sold a bill of good that these things don't skip and stuff?
So we're going to stop making 45s because nobody wants to buy singles. That's the biggest lie in the world. So they got rid of singles, so everybody had to buy albums.
Right.
So
CDs.
Everybody bought albums and CDs, spent all that money to get maybe one good song from certain artists.
Right.
And people got sick and tired of spending the money. They were spending less money. The industry's starting to die. And then along comes Napster. So now I'm going to put all the good songs up so you don't have to buy the whole album. And not only that, you can get it for free.
I remember the first time I heard about Napster, Guy, and I remember people saying, yeah, you can download. I couldn't even understand what people were talking about. Like, why would you want to do this? And then I remember the first time I went online and saw someone's singles collection, record collection, or CD collection, and you could just grab music.
Yeah.
It was life-changing. And I have to tell you, to this day, I still have some songs on my phone that were downloaded from the 90s from other people's music. And I want to tell you, I feel bad about it. It was wrong. It was stealing. Yeah. That was frickin' theft. Yeah. It was dishonest taking this music and downloading it and acting like, oh yeah, I own it now, and not paying for it.
And I absolutely get it, especially for the smaller artists and everything like that who definitely got hurt more than the big artists. But I go back, and it was the record companies have never really been very good to the artists or to the public.
Right.
There's not many times. I mean, I look at the careers of some of the people. Tom Petty had to fight with his record company at one point. They were going to raise the list price of albums by $1. And he said, I'm not going to do it. And if you look at the cover of his Hard Promises album, the picture's taken in a record store, and he's standing in front of a bin. And I believe the records are $7.99 each because they wanted to raise the list price to $8.99. And he said, I'm not going to do that to our fans. And if you look at the cover of that album, he's standing in front of a bin of records.
Is that right?
And whatever the price is on the albums, it's the $1 less than they wanted to make them. Because he fought and he got into a lawsuit.
He felt deep down that it's not fair to consumers.
Right. Absolutely.
his listeners.
So you see all these things. I very rarely hear an artist be like, I really have to say thank you to my record company because they've done all these things, blah,
Right.
blah, blah, blah. And I looked at what they've done to the fans over the years. Just the thing with the singles. Like that was crazy because I was a single guy, man.
But Joe, take me back to that era. The Napster guy came along,
Yeah.
invents this ingenious way to download music. People don't realize it wasn't always here. You could transfer songs instantaneously,
Right.
and the record companies just kind of said, "F that. We don't care. Do whatever you want to do."
Well,
At the beginning,
the artists, as soon as they realized what was going on, of course, one of the guys who led the charge was Lars from Metallica, and everybody gives him grief. But it's like, you know what? I get it. I'm a musician. I'm a musician too. If I had a hit song and somebody was stealing my song,
I'd be pissed.
and I wasn't getting anything for it, I'd be like, "What's going on?"
Yeah.
Like one of the things. As much as I'm a Springsteen fan, one of the things that really surprises me, he covered a song a couple different times called "High Hopes." It was originally done by a band called the Javelinas. It was written by this guy, Tim Scott McConnell, goes by the name now Leadfoot, and it was on his EP and video thing, Blood Brothers, that came out in the late 90s when the band reunited. And then he most recently put it out with a collection of stuff, and Tom Morello played on it and everything, and released the second version of the song. Hasn't given any royalties to the writer.
right?
He's like, we haven't gotten any royalty checks on that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's wrong. That's, to me, it's an equal kind of thing of us downloading all the songs. We're taking somebody's music and not giving them,
Yeah.
they created this, it's theirs.
I know Gene Simmons has been real vocal about this, and I agree with him 1,000%. It's stealing. It's stealing. It's like I'm going to go into Joe's garage and I'm going to steal something, and then I'm going to take it home with me.
Yeah.
Except you're doing it through the internet.
Yeah.
It's not fair, but people still do it to this day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Napster was such a weird thing to me. It was really, to me, my viewpoint of it was, they came up with this neat idea, and the record companies should have embraced it. They should have gone, well, it's not CDs.
Yeah,
But
they did in later years. I mean, everybody's got their own
way
thing.
late.
But it's because they just
It was long
the
gone.
whole thing was they didn't want to, and then they started restructuring the deals that they signed with the artists because we're not selling records the way we used to, so we have to restructure the way we're selling a deal. So we're going to get a part of everything. We're going to get a part of their live shows. We're going to get a part of their T-shirt sales.
Right.
We're going to get a part of. It's like, really?
Yeah.
It's like.
And really, to be honest with you, to be successful today, tell me if I'm wrong. You've got to be a great live act. You've got to.
You have to be great live. You have to be a businessman. You have to know everything. And then even still, so perfect example. I play a show. I'm playing a theater. I'm opening up for a national act. They're going to tell me what cut of my merchandise sales they're going to take.
Really?
The theater tells me.
You don't want to tell us
And then
today who you're
it depends. It depends on the theater. It could be anywhere from 15 to 25%.
Okay.
And then the other thing that can make it even more difficult is that sometimes the headlining act sets the price. So if you come to a show of mine, I'm going to sell you a T-shirt for $10 because that's what I can do and still make money.
Wow.
I play with a national act. It would be like, all our shirts are $35. You're going to sell yours at $35 too.
Right.
Nobody wants to buy my shirt at $35. They probably don't even want to buy
Sure they do,
yours at
Joe.
$35.
I want a Joe Rock
Look,
shirt.
I know how to be honest.
I'd buy one. I think I'd get one now. I was kind of pissed off when I was at the Stones concert. I bought a T-shirt. I think it was like $45-50. And to be honest with you, and I love the logo. I love all that. But even the material was like, they should get together with like a designer, like a real designer, and make like quality stuff. I've noticed this at all concert
let's
venues.
put it this way. If they're going to increase the quality of the shirt that you
then
paid
it's gonna be-
$45, $50
it's gonna
for,
be
what's it gonna
$95.
worth? There you go.
But just take a little bit less and just get a nicer quality. Don't buy everything out of crappy crap out of China.
Take a little bit less becomes more difficult when you're paying the venue a cut of the sales of the shirt. You're paying the record company.
Joe,
the cut.
the Stones are doing just fine. Okay.
I know, but still, everybody else along the way needs to get their cut. And they're going, well, what are we going to get?
What do we get? Where's our money?
Everywhere, somebody's got their hand out.
But what I'm saying is, just cutting music anymore is not enough to make it to be a superstar. Correct? I mean, you've got to tour.
I don't think we're creating superstars anymore.
You think it's over?
I think it's changing. I don't know where it's going next. We're not at the final destination. There's never going to be a final destination because it's always going to keep going.
Right.
But every time I think like, wow, maybe we've reached the point where we're at the end of all the changes, something else comes up.
Right.
You know, like I never envisioned smart speakers coming up.
Right.
And smart speakers, Alexa, Google,
Yeah.
Home, those are an amazing boon for so many different things.
Right. For music.
Yeah.
I mean,
well,
amazing.
you know, like I said, radio,
Yeah.
you're sitting there and you call out to your Alexa, to your Google Home, and it'll play MMO.
Right.
You know, it's like those are all these different things that you could do. So I never saw that. I never saw all the things coming that you can do in your car with your phone. I plug my phone in and my phone comes up on my dashboard.
Yeah, amazing, isn't it?
So it's like I can do that anywhere. So I take a vacation out to California. I plug my phone into the car. My phone comes up on the dashboard. Oh, there's the WMMO app.
Boom.
I'm in California, but I'm listening to my radio station in Florida.
Yeah, isn't that amazing? That is incredible. Yeah, that's...
So the technology is going to keep changing. Who knows what's going to happen next? There still could be time to change the way the industry works.
Yeah.
But the record companies, as of now, have not really looked out further to try and make the business model that's going to take them into what happens
Right.
next. They're still looking like, well, you know what? Nobody's buying new records. Let's go into our vaults and start releasing all this older stuff because we know that there's an audience there who will buy it.
You know what I think too about, you know, sticking with the music theme. I don't think there's going to be as many, if you will, Springsteens out there. I think that era of that megastar.
Absolutely.
But I think you're going to see what the concerts, they're going to combine acts. So like when you and I go to a concert, you know, we go to Madison Square Garden, it's going to 3 artists together.
But you know what?
That's how the 70s used
Our
to be in the 80s.
futures are past. Even before that, the 50s.
Yes, you'd have five
look
bands on the bill.
You'd have more because you'd have all these guys. They just come out and do their hits. You look at that's how the Buddy Holly thing happened. If you look at the list of artists,
isn't that weird?
It was Buddy Holly, it was the
Yeah.
Big Bopper, it was Richie Valens, Dion was
Right.
on that show. He just didn't get on the plane. Like you look, and that's just for the artists who were there. There was more, and we've seen these package tours. It started again for us in modern times with Lollapalooza,
Right.
You know, and so more and more we see that
Festivals
kind of thing. It's our past,
right.
Even Napster, even iTunes was a return to the past because now it's singles again.
Yeah.
Singles started like back in the 50s.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
became the thing for.
Yeah.
So that's like the future of the music industry keeps being its past.
Yeah.
Somewhere along the way, somebody has to realize what the true future of it's going to be.
Yeah. Well, the only thing that's sad is I think you're not going to have superstars with, 15 albums that were amazing. I think you're
agree.
going to have a star that, that album was okay.
Yeah.
She's got 2 hits on here. And if you can, if you can get 3 good top 10 hits in your life, okay, you can have a career the rest of your life.
I look at it like artist development is gone.
Yeah.
You look at the history. Motown was one of the first ones to do it. They would bring in their artists and they would groom them. They would teach them all these different things. They would give them etiquette classes and everything.
Right.
And they would try and help them become artists that would have sustainable careers.
Right.
And then other record companies started to do that. Like when they signed you to a deal, they signed you for like 4 records, 5 records, 7 records. And they would try and develop you and get you out and hopefully push your records, promote them in the press and everything. And along the way, that got done. It was like record companies now are like, how many did you sell all on your own as an independent? Okay, you know what, we're gonna sign you. We're gonna sign you to re-release what you already released, and that's it.
Right. Well, the record companies that sort of push themselves out of the business, to be honest with you. It's fewer and fewer artists. I mean, you can do it yourself.
Right.
I mean, you don't need that. You do need them for...
I can record it at home
Yes.
with the technology we have.
Yeah.
I could put it up on my own website and
Right.
sell it at,
Distribution, they still have some control over. Still some.
Right.
Big distribution is what they
Right,
still
but as an
do.
independent artist, it's a lot easier to get
Yeah.
your music out there because I just have to get it recorded and I can put it up on my website and I can have you buy it through PayPal and,
That's pretty cool.
yeah.
Joe Rock, I could sit here. I know you got to go. Get you out of the studio and appreciate your time. Love talking about music. Hopefully get you back in here and we'll...
Absolutely.
We're going to talk about politics next time.
Good luck with that.
And I'm
it's going to
gonna-
be a very one-sided conversation.
You're just going to sit there, aren't you? You're just going to sit and not yeah. You know what? I don't blame you. Yeah, why go through the hassle of having to listen to that later? But thanks for your time. Appreciate it, man.
Thanks for having me. I had a great time.
All right. We're out of here.
No more Roach on Florida TV.